By the time Cal Dugan rode into San Carlos, the ropes were already hanging from the cottonwoods, and 6 Apache women were standing beneath them in the hard noon glare, as if even the shade had refused them. The tallest had blood at the corner of her mouth. She lifted her chin and said, for the yard to hear, "If truth is a hanging thing here, let it swing in daylight." Cal drew up so sharply his gelding threw its head. The agency yard smelled of hot leather, dust, and old fear. Children watched from behind skirts. 2 guards stood by with carbines. Judge Silas Pruitt, sweating into his collar, held a paper in one hand and a watch in the other. Beside him stood Harlan Voss, the reservation agent, neat as a banker and twice as cold. "Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight, and if you feel like it, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We always like knowing who is gathered around the fire with us." "What's this?" Cal asked. "Justice," Voss said. "You delivered cattle, Mr. Dugan. Take your pay and move on." The bloodied woman turned toward Cal without meeting his eyes head-on. Respect remained in her even now. "How many head did you bring 3 days ago, Cowboy?" The question stopped the yard cold. 62, Cal said. A ripple passed through the 6 women. Voss answered at once. 38 fit for issue. The rest were no good. The woman gave a short, bitter laugh. "Children boiled hide last night. Funny how your weak cattle always grow strong enough to walk into somebody else's pocket." Only then did Cal really look at the others. Sanaa, the gray-haired one, stood with the contained stillness of somebody who had outlived many men's tempers and did not fear one more. Ruth's sleeve was torn at the shoulder. Rosa leaned slightly to spare one ankle. Vida kept edging nearer the youngest, Maya, as if her body had already decided what it would protect if things went worse. They were not a mob. They were women who had worked, worried, buried, counted, and finally spoken too clearly for a dishonest man to survive it. Voss's smile thinned. "Her name is Tala. She and the others stole agency goods, attacked a government guard, and caused his death. They have been tried." Cal looked at the dead guard under a blanket by the rail. No bullet hole. No knife wound. The throat had gone dark and crushed. A trampling, maybe. A fall. Not 6 bound women overpowering a man armed and mounted. "Tried by who?" Cal asked. Pruitt bristled. "By lawful authority present." Voss held out a receipt. 38 had accepted. Blank line for Cal's signature. "I delivered 62, Cal said. "Sign it anyway." Cal did not take the pencil. Men like Voss always assumed silence could be bought if you wrapped it in enough money. Cal had been bought cheap before, not always in coin. Sometimes in convenience. Sometimes in cowardice dressed up as practicality. 9 years earlier, near another Arizona creek, he had heard women crying while soldiers rode past at dawn. He had told himself it was none of his business. He had kept his eyes on the mule's string and carried that sound inside him ever since. Now Tala stood with a split lip and rope marks on her wrists, and Voss was telling him again that other people's suffering was not his concern. Tala let something slip from her cuff into the dust by Cal's boot. He covered it with his heel. Later, at the trough, he bent and palmed the scrap. Pencil marks scarred the page. 17 missing. Flour 24 barrels. Issued 9. Mrs. Wren, the mission teacher, crossed behind him with a water bucket. "If you mean to sleep tonight," she said, "don't sign that paper." "What happened?" The dead guard put hands on Ruth after dark. Sanaa struck his horse with a pitchfork handle. He went under the wagon. Voss needed witnesses turned into criminals before sunrise could bring questions. Cal looked back at the 6 women. One was gray-haired and straight-backed despite the welts at her wrists. One cradled an injured arm. The youngest looked barely grown. None of them begged. At sundown, the whole camp was forced into the yard. Voss wanted the lesson public. Fear spread better that way. The sky turned red over hell's 40 acres, and the guards led the women to the ladders. Sanaa, the oldest, began a low song under her breath. Tala stood still as stone. Pruitt checked his watch. Voss nodded. The first noose lifted. Cal stepped into the open with his rifle in one hand and Tala's scrap in the other. "Hold it." Voss stared at him. "Don't be a fool. I brought 62 head. If you mean to kill 6 women before anyone checks your books, that tells me everything I need to know." "Arrest him," Pruitt snapped. A guard reached for his pistol. Cal fired first. The bullet cut Tala's rope above the knot. Horses screamed. People shouted. Before the echo died, Tala drove her shoulder into the nearest guard, Sanaa hooked another man's ankle with bound feet, and the hanging fell apart in a tangle of smoke, dust, and panic. Cal slashed Tala's bonds. "Run," he said. "Not yet." She caught her balance and pointed toward the trader's store. "The books are in the cellar. If we leave without them, he hangs us tomorrow instead of today." The stable gate stood open. His horse was saddled. He could ride out clean and fast and live the rest of his life with one more memory he did not deserve to forget. Instead, he said, "Show me." The trader's cellar smelled of mold, coffee, and damp wood. Tala found the ledgers by memory. Mrs. Wren had taught her numbers and enough letters to follow a thief's trail across paper. She sorted pages quickly while Sanaa and Ruth dragged crates in front of the trapdoor. "He sold our blankets in Globe," Tala said. "Marked dead people as issued rations. Marked living people fed when they were starving. When we spoke, he called us thieves." Cal found his own name on several receipts and felt his stomach drop. Past shipments. Numbers he had never checked. Blank lines he had signed in lantern light after long drives because he trusted the wrong men and wanted sleep more than truth. Tala saw his face. "You knew," she said. "Not enough. Enough to look away." He could not deny it. "Yes." Her disappointment struck harder than anger. "Then don't help us to feel better about yourself. Help because it is due." That stripped the matter clean. They climbed out through a coal chute behind the store. Mrs. Wren was waiting in the arroyo with 2 mules, water, and a satchel of biscuits. "Sheriff Hale bought you 10 minutes, she said. "Spend them wisely." They moved north through the wash under a moon thin as a blade. Gravel slid under boots. The night smelled of creosote and river mud. Tala led them by signs so small Cal barely saw it. A bent grass blade, damp under sand. A hidden seep where she dug with a tin cup until enough water gathered to wet cracked mouths. That was her skill. She read country the way some men read scripture. Cal had grown up around men who boasted of what they could take from a place. Water, grass, labor, meat, profit. Tala moved through the dark as if asking first what the land would allow. Twice she changed course for reasons he could not see, and twice they later heard riders pass where they would have been. Once she touched a mesquite branch, felt its coolness, and led them to a seep no wider than a wash basin. Another time she stopped them from crossing open sand because a night bird had flushed too low, which told her horses had disturbed the brush not long before. By the second hour, Cal trusted her judgment the way a drowning man trusts rope. Near midnight, Rosa twisted an ankle. Ruth nearly fainted. Sanaa's wrists bled again. The easy answer sat before them clear as moonlight. Split up, hide the women, and save only the books. Tala saw Cal thinking it. "If you ride alone, you might beat him to Globe." "And tell them what?" Cal said. "That I misplaced 6 witnesses on the way to justice." Sanaa almost smiled. "Good. He learns." They rested at dawn in a basalt cut where the air held the night's cold. They shared 2 biscuits 8 ways. No one complained. Hunger had worn complaint down to bone long ago. The women did not fill the pause with useless talk. Sanaa checked Ruth's bandage with careful old fingers. Rosa rubbed Maya's shoulders against the cold. Bida tore the second biscuit into crumbs so even the weakest could swallow some. Cal watched them and understood another thing that Voss had never understood. People do not become dangerous to power when they turn violent. They become dangerous when they stay human under cruelty. Cal asked Tala, "Why speak at all, knowing what Voss is?" She sat with the ledgers in her lap, watching first light creep across the rock. Because children were getting sick. Because old people were chewing coffee grounds for supper. Because once you've heard a lie counted over empty plates, silence tastes like it too. A pebble clicked above them. Everybody looked up. Riders. Mercer Pike, Voss's foreman, spread his men along the ridge. "Throw out the books," he called down. "And maybe we forget the old woman and the young one." Sanaa spat in the dust. Mercer laughed. Then the first shot struck stone beside Cal's head. Quiet choices were over. If you were there, with your own horse still under you and the easy road somewhere behind, would you have ridden for your pay and left them to the rope, or turned back toward trouble? Tell me true in the comments. Most people don't know who they are until the answer costs them something. Cal fired from behind basalt, shaving Mercer's hat brim and buying Tala time to move the others through a crack in the rocks. One rider came down on foot. Cal clubbed him with the rifle stock. Another tried the gap and caught a stone from Tala square across the gun hand. Then they were scrambling, half crawling, half sliding into a wash below while shots cracked overhead. Morning came hot and merciless. They ran bent low through reeds along the Gila, then up into a side canyon where loose scree rolled under every step. Hoof prints at the river crossing told Tala Mercer's riders had circled ahead. Another way? Cal asked. A bad one, she said. Those are the ones left. She led them higher into juniper and broken stone. By noon, Ruth collapsed. Blood had seeped through her dress from where a spur or wagon edge had opened her side during the confusion in the yard. Leave me, Ruth whispered. No, Tala said. Cal tore a strip from his bedroll, packed the wound, and lifted Ruth himself. He had spent too much of his life deciding what losses were practical. Mercer saw them on the ridge and opened fire. The next minutes broke into hard pieces. Stone chips cutting cheeks. Maya crying out when Rosa fell and rose again. Sanaa dragging Bitta by the elbow. Tala turning back in open ground to snatch the dropped satchel of ledgers. Cal firing from one knee while Ruth's blood warmed his shirt. Then Mercer shouted the one sentence he should have swallowed. Kill the cowboy if you must, but bring Tala back breathing. Voss wants the one who writes. Everything changed. It was not the books Voss feared most. It was the woman who could read them. Cal shoved Tala flat as a bullet split stone where her head had been. Now you know what he's afraid of, he said. She glared at him through dust. I knew yesterday. They reached an abandoned line shack in the pines by late afternoon. The roof sagged, one window was gone, and the door hung crooked, but it gave them walls and a slope behind it where smoke might hide. Cal barred the door with a wagon tongue while Tala and Sanaa worked over Ruth by lantern light. Boiled water. Needle. Steady hands. No panic wasted. Outside, Mercer tested them the way a coyote tests a fence line. A branch snapped here. Hoof leather creaked there. Once a rider passed so near the missing window that Cal could smell horse sweat and tobacco. The pines held the day's warmth in their bark, and resin sweetened the air in a way that made the danger feel almost crueler. Beauty had no business being that close to fear. Maya began to shake from exhaustion, and Bitta wrapped both arms around her without a word. Rosa sat with her bad ankle stretched stiff before her, jaw locked tight against pain. Even half-conscious, Ruth kept trying to apologize for slowing them down until Sanaa laid one weathered hand across her mouth and told her to save strength for living. Then Tala opened the ledger again and went still. The page with Voss's signature was missing. For one breath, nobody spoke. Then Cal remembered the torn scrap in his pocket. The only piece he'd kept from the yard. Not enough to hang a powerful man by itself. Maybe enough to make him lie if he believed the rest still existed. Outside, Mercer called, smooth as oil. By dark I'll burn you out or drag you down. For a moment Cal believed him. Ruth lived because Tala had the sort of calm that comes only to people long practiced in tending wounds nobody else bothered to see. She stitched the torn side, while Sanaa held Ruth steady and whispered to her. When it was done, Tala crossed the room and crouched beside Cal by the door. Let me see your arm, he said. A bullet had grazed high along her sleeve. She ignored the question and held out her hand instead. Cal placed the torn receipt scrap in it. This is all I have, he said. If we get Voss talking in front of witnesses, it may be enough. Tala studied the paper, then him. When I saw your name in those books, I hated how easy it was to believe one more man had sold us for comfort. You weren't wrong. No, she leaned back against the wall. Firelight caught the bruise at her jaw. But a person is not only the worst thing they have done, if they are willing to stand in the fire where everyone can see it. The words settled between them like something heavy and clean. Cal looked at the floorboards. 9 years ago I watched soldiers ride past women crying and told myself it wasn't mine to stop. I've been trying to outride that sentence ever since. And have you? No. A faint, tired softness touched her mouth. Then stop writing. Turn and face it. He cleaned the graze on her arm and wrapped it with the last good strip of cloth. She did not pull away. In that small room, with riders in the trees and death still close enough to smell, they made no promises. What passed between them was quieter than that. Mutual recognition. The lonely kind that knows another lonely thing on sight. Sanaa handed Tala a blue bead bracelet worn smooth with age. Your mother's, she said. Tala rolled it once through her fingers. She used to say lonely people don't need fixing half so much as they need someone willing to sit beside the loneliness without being afraid of it. If this story is moving you tonight, you're exactly who we wrote it for. A like and a subscribe is how you tell us to keep these fires burning. Before dawn, Sheriff Tom Hale found them by following Mercer's riders instead of Cal's tracks. He came alone. "I can buy you one chance," he said. "Pruitt has ridden ahead to Globe. Voss means to swear warrants. Make this official and bury the truth under better paper before noon. If you want him, you have to stand in that courtroom first." "Why help us now?" Cal asked. Hale's face tightened. "Because I'd like to shave tomorrow without looking away from my own reflection." They rode hard through back country Tala knew and Hale did not ask about. By late morning, Globe rose out of the dust, all false fronts or wagons, and men who believed a clean vest made a clean soul. Market day filled the street. That helped until it didn't. Mercer and two riders waited near the courthouse hitch rail. He spotted them first. "Now," Cal said. Tala and the other women did the boldest thing available. They dismounted in plain sight and walked straight for the courthouse steps. Not running, not hiding, walking. People parted for them because courage has a way of clearing a road when fear cannot. Mercer lunged for Tala. Cal met him hard against the rail. Bone slammed wood. Mercer was younger and heavier, but Cal had been carrying older things. Mercer drove an elbow into his ribs and reached for his pistol. Cal caught the wrist, smashed it against the post, and heard it crack. The gun dropped. Hale kicked it under a wagon and bellowed for order. Inside, Judge Pruitt was dictating warrants when Tala pushed through the courtroom doors with Sanaa at her shoulder and the ledgers in her hands. The room went still. Dust hung in the window light. A ceiling fan rope swayed lazily in one corner where a clerk had left it. Two miners near the back took off their hats without seeming to know they had done it. Tala's jaw was still bruised from Voss's slap. Sanaa's wrists were wrapped in strips of clean cloth. Together they looked less like fugitives than like the truth arriving late, because men had tried so hard to bar the road. Voss rose. "These women are escaped prisoners. Then explain why your dead receive rations and your living starve," Tala said. Pruitt pounded the bench. "This court will not hear." "It will hear me," Hale said from the doorway, with Ruth pale but upright beside him and Mrs. Wren carrying the mission burial records. That changed the weather in the room. Ranchers in the gallery straightened. One recognized his cattle brand on a receipt Tala held up. Another said his flour loads had gone missing the same month. Mrs. Wren named children buried during weeks the ledger showed full issue. Sanaa began reciting numbers from memory. Blankets received, barrels due, names falsely marked dead, names falsely marked fed. She did not hurry. Truth sounded almost gentle coming from her, and that made it worse. Voss tried calm. He tried charm. He tried calling them liars without using the word. Tala answered each point plainly, never raising her voice. The more controlled she remained, the more his own began to fray. Then she laid Cal's torn scrap beside the ledger and said, "You want the missing page. I know. So say it plain, Agent Voss. Why did you need 6 women hanged before sundown?" A hush fell over the room. Voss's nostrils flared. "Because savages who incite murder do not deserve lenience." There was the panic, naked at last. Cal stepped forward. Guard Peebles died under his own wagon after trying to drag Ruth away. Ask to see the wheel bruise if the body isn't buried yet. Ask why Voss wanted Tala alive while the others could die. Because she can read his books, and he knows it. Pruitt rose too fast, nearly upsetting his chair. "Sheriff, remove these people." "No," Hale said. "One word. Final." Pruitt made his mistake then. He came down from the bench to seize the ledger himself. Tala turned away with it. Voss lost whatever mask he had left and lunged. His hand clamped on her shoulder. Cal crossed the floor and hit him low. They crashed into the witness rail. Voss clawed for Cal's face. Cal drove him back. The room exploded in noise. Children were pulled clear. Men shouted. Pruitt tried for the side door and found Mrs. Wren there with the coal scuttle lifted in both hands. "Sit down, Your Honor," she said. He did. Voss wrenched free long enough to grab a dropped pistol. He swung it toward Tala. She did not step back. She seized the courthouse spittoon with both hands and hurled it into his wrist. The shot went into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Hale drew. 3 ranchers slammed Voss to the boards before he could breathe again. That was justice starting to look like itself. After that, everything the corrupt men had built began to come apart fast. Once fear broke, testimony rushed in from every direction. A teamster admitted hauling agency blankets to a private warehouse. A clerk confessed that Pruitt had signed warrants before hearing a word from the accused. One rancher's wife said she had seen Voss dining on fresh beef the same week children at San Carlos lined up for moldy flour. The room that had belonged to powerful men for years quit belonging to them in the space of 20 minutes. Sealed receipts turned up in Pruitt's satchel. The Traders Globe invoices matched missing agency stock. Telegraphs went to Tucson and Prescott before Voss could buy silence. By the week's end, he was under territorial charge for fraud, conspiracy, and ordering an unlawful execution. Pruitt lost bench, standing, and the last scraps of dignity he had mistaken for power. The trader lost his license, his inventory, and every friend who liked his money better than his company. But the sweetest part of justice is rarely the ruin of the cruel. It is the relief of the people they had pressed to the ground. The 6 women were not taken back in chains. New clerks came. Old books were opened. Cattle contracts were checked line by line. Flour reached the hungry before it reached the black market. Blankets returned. Ruth healed. Rosa's ankle mended. Maya laughed again. Bitta learned enough letters from Tala to keep a second set of counts no clerk ever expected to face. Sana took to sitting outside the ration shed on issue days with her hands folded and her eyes half closed. No man liked cheating with her nearby. Cal stayed to testify, then stayed to mend a fence, then stayed because leaving began to look more cowardly than remaining. He repaired corral rails, hauled lumber for a new storehouse, and once spent half a day teaching Maya how to throw a loop well enough to catch a post instead of her own boot. Nobody made a speech about accepting him. In that country, belonging was measured in labor, consistency, and whether you could be counted on when the wind changed. Tala did not forgive him all at once, which was one more reason Cal trusted what grew between them. Trust returned the way water gathers in hard country, slowly, invisibly at first, then all at once enough to drink from. He and Tala never needed big declarations. Their closeness lived in work. In the canteen he left filled by her door. In the gate he repaired before she had to ask. In the biscuit she always saved him from the least burnt side of the pan. When the first cold reached down from the high country, they rode one evening above the river where the late light turned the Gila to hammered copper. Voices carried faint from the corrals below. Tala stood wrapped in her shawl, the blue bead bracelet at her wrist, and said, almost to herself, "Peace doesn't arrive like thunder. Most times it comes in bread rising, horses breathing, and nobody reaching for a weapon when your name is spoken." Cal looked at her and understood that some endings do not feel like endings at all. They feel like a door left open on purpose. In spring, beans climbed beside the mission wall, a bay mare foaled under clear weather, and children ran between wash lines with full mouths and loud opinions. Tala read issue totals aloud before they were posted. Cal stacked pine by the door and pretended not to notice when 2 cups were set out for coffee instead of 1. On certain evenings, when the yard went gold and the horses grazed quietly below, it almost seemed the world had grown ashamed of what it once allowed. The supper smoke lifted straight into the still air while the river held the last light, and the horses breathed below like the earth itself had finally decided to rest. Next time, we'll tell the story of a deaf woman sent to a remote cattle ranch because her own brothers were ashamed of her, and the scarred widower who learned her silence was the truest voice in his house.